Welcome back. This is Ron with Stay Sharp Guides, and in today's sharpness evaluation and resharpening, we're looking at the Samurai grizzly stick. It won't matter if it's the red or the black, the process is going to be the same. I can tell you already, these heads come out of the box pretty sharp, so this is going to be a fun evaluation. Now this head has a couple of very small screws, one on either side, so you'll need a small Allen key to remove those screws. Then tug on the blade to get it off the ferrule. Screwing it into an arrow will help you. And then we're going to sharpen it with our fixed blade guide. Now this head is new, so we'll look at it under the microscope in our sharpness tester. But I will be sharpening it on our diamond plates. Now our 5-plate set comes with 240, 400, 800, 12, and 2500 grit. Because this is a new head, I'll probably start at 800 and just do these three grits. After it's been shot through an animal, shot into the dirt, and kind of nicked up, you'll want to have all 5 grits to sharpen it, but we will sharpen it on those 3 grits, and then we will finish it with buffing compound on cereal box cardboard. So I'm going to take the blade off of the ferrule, and then we're going to look at it under the microscope, and after that we're going to go get a baseline starting point for sharpness. Now that we've seen the edge under the microscope, as always, I will put the blade in the edge on up certified sharpness meter and see what sort of an edge we get. .215. That is a very sharp edge. Now let's see if we can best it by doing some sharpening with our fixed blade guide. You're going to notice when you go to put the blade in the fixed blade guide that it can be tight. So you can wedge it in about the bevel, right, and get it started. It'll be in there. You can take a screwdriver and spread the jaws slightly. You can increase the width by about 50% to drop the blade in. You can use something like a dime to spread the jaws a little bit. Again, about 50% of their width, and then you should be able to grab a blade, give it a little twist with the dime, and drop the blade right in without a problem. Take the dime out. So it is going to be tight. That is perfectly acceptable. Now I've got the blade off the ferrule, so I can set these 2 small screws aside, and I won't need the ferrule. This would be your blade positioning, and if you notice this band-aid while taking it off, I did have a little slip. Nothing major, but I thought I'd cover it up for this. So be careful when you're taking it out. This is what it would look like for a blade placement standpoint. So when you put the guide on its roller and you tip it down, you should have contact along the entire edge. If this side is sticking out too far, it'll hit here and you'll have a gap. So bring that in or bring this out. The same is true here. If it were hitting here first, push that into the jaws or bring this out, but that is the proper positioning. Now if we look at it close up, you'll see without any tape on the roller, we are matching the factory angle. If you want a little bit steeper angle, certainly you can wrap some tape on the rollers. I advocate for a little bit steeper angle. You'd be putting a secondary bevel on there. You wouldn't be touching the entire grind just out here near the edge, but that's entirely up to you. I happen to like a little bit steeper angles, but I'm going to sharpen this one at the factory edge. Now, I did notice something else about these blades, but I was forewarned by my customers, and it may be hard to see here. Let me try this way. But if you look down that edge in the center, it's a little bit deeper. So instead of being perfectly straight, it's actually kind of bowed. And I get a lot of pictures from my customers saying, hey, I'm wearing the Sharpie marker off here and here, but not in the center. And here's a picture from one of the customers. So knowing that, I'm going to color this up with some Sharpie marker. This is the key to telling you whether you have good blade placement or not. So color up the entire bevel. If you were using tape on the roller, you wouldn't necessarily need to color up the whole edge because you'd only be sharpening out on the very cutting edge instead of the whole edge. So color up the blade edge with Sharpie marker. Now in this case, I'm only going to be using 2500 grit just to see if my placement is good. I could actually do it on this cardboard and see the wear. So you see how I'm hitting out here, but not necessarily in the middle. So let's try it on the diamond plate. Now, one other key to sharpening on diamond plates and sandpaper is don't push down hard. The quickest way to wreck this diamond plate or wet dry sandpaper is to push down with a lot of weight. It's almost as if you're trying not to apply any weight and just float over it. Let the diamonds do their work. You will destroy a diamond plate by pushing down too hard. So I'm just going to give it a couple of light strokes from a couple of different angles here. And just as all of my customers tell me, it'll touch here and here, but not in the center. So you need to correct that. And this is purely speculation, but I think these blades are stamped out and there may be a little bit of a potato chip type curling going on, or when they grind the bevel, they don't produce a straight edge, but you can see a definite depression in there. So we're going to go after this with 800 grit. We'll chase away that little belly, that sway in the center, and then we will come back and talk about how to sharpen the back side of a single bevel. So stay tuned. All right, because that curved depression in the center of the blade was a lot to remove, I ended up dropping down to a 400 grit plate. If you've watched my other videos, you know that I preach the burr. When you run into the burr, you know you've completed that edge. Take a piece of Post-it note, cut some strips about 1/4 of an inch to 3/8 of an inch wide. On the flat side, the back side, when you slide the paper, it should run the entire length. You should be able to feel a burr that you run into. And the reason you don't want to use a full-size sheet is if I press this on here, it's going to say, yeah, look at that, I've got a burr. Well, you don't know if you maybe don't have a burr in the center, or there's places that you're missing a burr. To verify it, use a narrow piece, do the entire edge, then you'll know you have a burr. Now that I've got a burr at 400 grit, to break that burr off, I pick the plate up, I lay the blade on here, and I trap it down. Now this is the reason you want to take the ferrule off, because right now I would be scratching up that nice black or red coating on the ferrule. So it's important that the ferrule is removed. So trap it down and give it a couple of strokes, keeping it flat. You always want to keep the back side of a single bevel perfectly flat. And you want to break off the burr with the grit that you've created it with. So lay it on there, make sure it's flat, and give it a few strokes. And any remnant of the burr left behind is going to mimic dullness. So spend some time getting rid of the burr. And you will get rid of the burr at each grit. Every grit that you create a burr, you use that grit to get rid of the burr. Now we'll test it again. And I slide right off. There's no burr left. So that's my signal to now switch from 400 grit to 800 grit and repeat this process. I'll be back. While I've got this dirty plate here, a common question I get is, how do I clean my plates? Well, one way is to tap. Another way is to use you can either use an old toothbrush or wait till your wife's not home and use hers, but you can brush off the plate to clean it up. Again, tap it on something hard, even something like a napkin. If I wipe it, you see how black it gets. So tapping it, wiping it, using an old toothbrush, don't run them underwater. They're going to get discolored. There's going to be metal trapped in there. Just tapping them will knock it out. Brushing it out is sufficient to get them clean. If you run them underwater, what's going to happen is, in this case it's a stainless blade. If you were using a carbon steel blade and you ran it underwater, even though you dried it, the next time you'd come back, all that trapped carbon steel would be rusty. So don't use water, don't use oil. That just gums up the work. You're not building up enough heat or taking away big chips that you need water or oil as a coolant. But that's how you would clean the plates. All right, so now we've gone through with 800 grit. We're going to test for a burr again. As you keep testing, it's probably a good idea to cut some new pieces of Post-it note, or take the existing one that you've got that you see is getting kind of funky and cut a new clean edge on it. You don't want the paper to be all rolled over. So again, your paper should stop and hang up, right? See how it's bending and stopping? It's hitting a definite burr. Now, because this is a 800 grit burr, we will pick it up, lay the blade flat on the 800 grit plate, and give it a few strokes. You want to get rid of all of the 800 grit burr with the 800 grit plate. Leave no burr behind. That will mimic dullness. And as we are going through this process, you're sharpening both sides. So people think, oh, I've got a single bevel, I really only have to sharpen one side. No, that's not the case. You will sharpen both sides because you have to get rid of the burr. So give it a few strokes. After you've gotten rid of the burr at 800 grit, switch to 1200 grit. And that's where we're going to go next. So I will be right back. Alright, so I spent less than 5 minutes at 1200 grit. As you can see, I am stopping all along that edge. The paper is catching at every inch of the edge. Again, you need to break off the burr. Now we're using 1200 grit to break off the 1200 grit burr. And when I get to the two final grits, 12 and 2500. After I've broken off the burr, I'll give it just a few strokes back on the bevel side. The burr is like a paper clip. You can only bend it so many times and it's going to break. You definitely need to get rid of all of the burr. Any burr left behind is going to make you think the blade is still dull. So at 12 and 2500, go through this extra burr breaking just to ensure you've got a razor sharp edge. Alright, so now we are finished with 1200 grit. We're going to move on to 2500. Be right back. Alright, 5 minutes. I watched the clock on this one. 5 minutes have elapsed, so I stopped and I cut a fresh edge on this piece of paper. See how it stops? It catches on the burr, right? So that is hard to detect at 2500 grit with your fingerprint, so certainly use a narrow piece of paper. Alright, now that we've created the burr at 2500, the process is the same. You want to break off the burr. Keep it flat. Do not introduce any bevel to the flat side, the back side of a single bevel. Now that we've got rid of the burr, again we'll do a few light strokes. Then we will trap it again, flat. We want no burr left behind. That will give us bad results under the microscope, bad results on the sharpness tester, and bad results on the animals that you shoot, because any burr left behind is going to make the head seem dull. So this little extra step, and I can feel it rolling under the blade, that I'm catching it and breaking it off. A couple of final last strokes. There should be no burr left behind. Alright, I'm going to clean this up, make sure there's no grit left on it, and then we are going to switch to buffing compound next. The last step is buffing. Now, people talk about a leather strop, and I've said it all along, I think that's wasted money. Cereal box cardboard, in this case, I'm an old guy, so I eat Raisin Bran, but I've heard good things about Count Chocula boxes too. Take your buffing compound, rub it all over the cardboard. Now, if you did this on leather, eventually it's going to get impacted, and you're going to see what it looks like when the metal all gets impacted into this waxy buffing compound crayon. With leather, you have to redress your strop. You have to scrape it, you have to heat it, you have to clean it up. With this cardboard, I can just throw this in the garbage, eat another box of cereal, and I've got a new strop. When it comes to buffing, it's only a backward stroke. Lift, backward stroke. You don't go forward, because you'll cut the buffing compound off the cardboard, or you'll cut the cardboard itself. But as you can see, I've only taken a couple strokes and it's getting black. So imagine on a leather strop where you've done a bunch of heads. You need to get rid of that buffing compound, all that spent metal that's in there, and resurface your leather. I don't need that hassle, so I just use cereal box cardboard and throw it away when it becomes impacted. You can't overdo this step. You can buff until your arm gets tired. You're not really taking off that much material, but what you are doing is you're producing this really fantastic mirrored edge. Now you definitely want to get buffing compound all the way out to the edge of the cardboard because you are creating a burr. And I will trap the cardboard on the diamond plate and do the same step. Flip it over here, and I will trap it and light strokes back and forth to remove the buffing compound burr. And you'll be polishing the back side of that edge. Again, a single bevel means you still have to sharpen two sides, the flat side and the bevel side. I'll keep going with this process, and then we're going to look at it under the microscope and on the sharpness tester to see what sort of an effect we have. I'll be right back. Now that I've got the edge stropped, you'll get a feel for what it looks like. It's reflecting the camera right back at me. So it is no doubt going to be incredibly sharp, and the next step will be to look at it under the microscope as well as on the sharpness tester. The wear that you see on this corner, and we cover this on our frequently asked questions page at staysharpguide.com, when you're sharpening, that corner will contact the diamond plate or the sandpaper or the buffing compound. It's kind of shiny now. It'll only happen on the first head once you've broken it in. Don't worry about that happening anymore. That wear is just a one-time thing. So let's look at it and see what our results are. That edge looked pretty good under the microscope. I have some high hopes for this edge under the sharpness meter, so let's give it a shot. .73. That might be a new record. I know I was in the 70s with another head, but we have this head incredibly sharp. That is a fantastic score. These are a great head, good steel. You have to get rid of that little bit of a bevel that's in there, or that little waviness, but we certainly got it sharper, and that is sharper than a razor blade. How do I know? Because I have tested razor blades in this machine, and I'll show you what the score is right now. Well, there you have it. That is the Samurai. It won't matter if it's the red or the black. They come very sharp. This company is known for producing good out of the box edges. But you will own sharpening on these heads for the life of them. Whether you shoot into targets, through animals, whatever, they're going to dull. And in this case, the fixed blade guide did a great job returning that edge. It's stainless, so you don't need to necessarily oil it. But like any other head, I can get it sharp, but its ability to hold an edge is going to be based on the metal that it's made from. Good steel, hard steel will stay sharp a long time. Poor quality steel will dull quicker. This is a good steel head. This will serve any bow hunter very well. So that is the process of sharpening the Samurai heads. Thanks for watching.